All right, so what's your name?
Danny Benjamin.
It's Claudine Benjamin.
My name is James Babana.
My name is Giovanna Abraham.
Mikhail Michu, or Michael Miko.
Maria Mishaya.
Alex.
No last name?
Oh, Murad.
Tuma Thomas Romanous.
My name is Fred.
Father Andrew Aziz. So are you firstborn generation in America?
I am.
I am.
I am.
Absolutely.
I am, yes.
Technically, I was born outside of America. I was born in England, but we were like the first generations here.
No, I was born in Iraq, and I lived there for all of 30 days. And then we left in 1974 on the way over to Lebanon and Greece. I got here in June of 1976.
What do you wish that your parents understood more about first generation born Assyrians in America?
I wish that they understood how difficult it was to speak Assyrian at home, be surrounded in, the culture at home and like events and family gatherings, but also the difficulty of having to go to school and not really having anyone to relate to. Because my parents didn't finish, I believe the highest grade that my mom went up to, she was like in 5th grade, and then my dad never finished high school. So they don't understand the educational aspect and how many years that takes.
Just the things that they don't really do back home, like extracurriculars and certain types of friend groups, like sleepovers. They didn't let me have sleepovers. That was a big hard no. Never could travel with friends, couldn't go on like school trips. You could go on a field trip if my dad was with me, you know what I mean? And it was for safety. It wasn't because they didn't trust me or anything, but it's a new country, new culture. You don't know what to expect.
Education mostly, because they would always like push education on me, and they would just expect me to know everything, especially when it came to like the math and sciences. Like those were like my two most difficult subjects. And I just feel like I didn't have enough help in them, and my parents would just be like, well, you just gotta do it. You just gotta learn it, And like, growing up in my elementary schools, there wasn't a lot of options for help. So I kind of had to like teach myself everything, and they would always compare me to like my American peers, like, oh, how come so-and-so got an A in math and you got like a B or something? And I'm like, well, I'm trying, and trying was not getting an A.
Were there some things you wish your parents would understand a bit better while you were growing up about being in America versus them in Iraq? Do you think that they had a few things that were hard to understand about you guys growing up here versus the way that they grew up?
Honestly, for my parents, no. I really don't think so. Maybe for like Marcel, yeah, like him growing up, my brother. But
the guinea pig, the older brother.
Yeah, I think the 7-year gap gave him more room to develop in America.
Okay. So like, what things do you remember from your brother they would give him a hard time about, do you know?
Leaving the house, not coming home a lot.
There was a lot more of this like external pressure to find, like, for example, find a boyfriend, girlfriend, find love.
I think how important it is to keep our culture and language alive. I think some of that may have been lost, not to their fault. Like obviously they were coming here to give us a better life, but I feel like if I was taught more about stuff back home, and I just came back from Iraq, so it was my first trip there. But seeing how we are there, and I wish some of that was instilled in me a little bit more.
So our parents, all of our parents, obviously they moved here escaping persecution. They want a better life for us. The scary part with that is, statistically speaking, whenever you remove anyone from their native land, you remove the culture, inevitably over 3 or 4 generations, we start to dilute. So it's a double-edged sword leaving Atra. And because we left Atra, we will naturally start to become more westernized. Now, my parents were very good at preserving adat al-diyan, our habits, our traditions, language, like we spoke Surat at home. But I don't think most of our parents really understood the level of effect that being in the Western world would have on us. Because it doesn't just change our culture, it's changing our ideology, it changes the way we make sense of the world. The second thing was career, and this is going to be probably very, very quickly applicable to most people listening. I chose a degree that was not common. It wasn't doctor, lawyer, real estate, wasn't any of that. It was graphic design. I met another Assyrian guy who was in the industry, Rabel Bit Shmuel, who was my mentor. But when I walk in the house and I tell my parents I want to go to school for graphic design, they had no idea what it meant. So they naturally were afraid of it. They said, Bruni, we don't know what this is. We don't know if they make good money. We don't do anything. And then instead of taking a defensive approach, I understood the position my parents were coming from, which is a position of care and worry for their son. I did my research and I told them this is how much they make. This is where I can go to school. I have my friend Rebel, who's my mentor. He can guide me. These are the kinds of jobs I can get, so on and so forth. And my parents then eventually understood that.
It's all right to sleep over people's houses, all right? It's all right. I was not going to get kidnapped. I was not going to get kidnapped.
But you don't think they had a point? They had a point.
Our father has a story of him in Greece at the age of like 8 years old, and men in a van offered to pick him up and give him a ride, and he said, all right. And I have to go get fingerprinted and go through all of this, and I can't sleep over someone's house.
We got fingerprinted when we were kids at
I'm
a
in the
DMV.
system.
At a,
Before I was in the system,
it was
I
a car
already in the system.
dealership. It was a car dealership. We got fingerprinted. Remember that?
And I called the cops that day. Do you remember?
Yeah. Okay. No, I understand, but it was a different world back then too. You know what I mean? But so you wish that they were more lenient on you about certain things, or do you think that they had a hard time understanding some things with America? I feel like our parents are pretty well westernized in a way.
Absolutely, but I get it. You're coming to a land that you don't know of, right?
Yeah.
And you don't know what your kids are going to do. You don't know how the people are. At least back home, you know the areas, right?
Yeah.
So you have an idea of how everything's going to go. But
Okay, there was no such thing as sleepovers.
We just talked
Like
about
in
that,
our
yeah.
culture, the idea of you sleeping over at somebody's house is like,
Why do you think that is?
well, because in their world, it's a sign of you would never do that. It's an imposition on an honor thing. Because my dad would say, like, you have a bed. Why would you? They look at it as like you need a place to stay. Kind of like charity, if you will.
Right.
They did not understand that. The other thing my dad and mom didn't, field trips. The idea of us going somewhere other than school, like this was back in a day, huh? Like
Right.
this
You're
was
talking
before-
70s, 80s.
Yes,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
safer back then. Now I couldn't even imagine, but back in the day, my dad's like, "You're not gonna go." We had a field. They wanted to take us to zoo. We were 6 years old. My dad's like, "You're not going. Like, I'm not gonna be there. You're not going." As a kid, you didn't understand it. Now I'm a parent. I get it. Right, I get
Okay.
it. So on the cultural thing, and then the slang words, right?
Right.
Hey, like, yeah, you suck. My dad's all, what? Like, or you call each other, hey, dog, what's up, dog? Dog in our language.
Oh, you're getting
is the
backslapped.
ultimate insult. So they're like, no, dad, no. So just stuff. It's just cultural.
I think the biggest thing for me was language. So we spoke predominantly Assyrian at home. And so when I started going to kindergarten, and my dad put me in sports early, so I was also in taekwondo and like gymnastics and like other like sports. And I had no idea what they were saying to me. So I only spoke Assyrian. So my dad would have to come to the classes or come to like the practices and things. Yeah. I remember my taekwondo instructor was like, you need to teach him how to say kick and punch. And I'm like 4 years old. And my dad told him, you should learn how to say it in Assyrian.
Did your parents have a hard time integrating with the culture outside of the Middle East?
I don't think so, actually, because my dad was traveling quite a bit because he was a mechanical engineer from Iraq. So he was Saudi Arabia. He was traveling around for the oil pipelines. So he had already had experience traveling France, like different parts of Europe. And my mom, from a younger age, I think when she was like 16 or so, she moved to England with her family. So they already started getting a lot of this like assimilation into a Western culture from a younger age.
I did. Again, I think there was a difference between my experience with my mom and my dad because my mom was 5 years old when she moved here. So she was always very much pursue your dreams, do what you want to do. And I think my dad had a little bit more of an idea of what he wanted us to do, which is fine. I think everyone wants the best for their kids and what they understand is the best for their children. I wanted to do musical theater and singing and acting and all these things, and as I grew older I realized it wasn't necessarily sustainable and didn't really align with what I wanted in the long run. But I think when I was a child that was something that I felt conflict with my parents about because I felt support from one side and not the other, just because of what they think is going to make you successful in this country versus where they're coming from.
So even that like rap, hip hop culture and like things like that, like the way it was influencing, the way you were dressing, the way you were talking, the way you talk to your parents and, like, hey, mom and dad, I want to go out with my friends. It's like, You know,
Yeah.
they look at you sideways a little bit sometimes.
And then you can't go out 2 nights in a row because that, God forbid, you do that. They're gonna for sure.
Yeah, for example, yeah.
Do you think that it was an adjustment for your parents to come to America?
For sure, yeah. But my dad was one of those rare ones where he spoke fluent English in Iraq in 1960s. So it wasn't like he came and didn't know anything. And then I guess because Iraq was a British colony at one point in time, English was kind of the norm.
Right. Yeah, my grandfather spoke English as
yeah.
well.
My dad worked at the embassy for Saudi Arabia in Iraq, and so they weren't. I always tell people that come from other countries are usually upper middle class. You're not poor making that big of a jump, right?
Yeah, it's very difficult.
Yeah, very
of
difficult.
course.
So it was an adjustment for sure for my mom and them, and it was for them as well. But for me, I grew up here. So like I literally grew up here. So I had one foot in their world and one foot here.
Our parents had to sacrifice a lot to come to this country, to then develop and live a life that makes us, happy in where we're at now. So with that in mind, all the things they sacrificed, they also have this expectation of where we need to be in life, what job, career to have, versus what you want to do with your life. So did you have a hard difficulty choosing what your parents wanted for your life with the consideration of the sacrifices in mind that they made for you versus pursuing a life that you wanted for yourself that they may not understand? Did you ever have a problem with that?
Oh,
with them?
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. I think college education was like the #1 priority. And going out of high school, I never had a direction. Besides, like, I wanted to cut hair and stuff now. But I kind of did it only for the sole purpose of my parents. And I don't know, I'm happy to an extent that I did do that. I did what they wanted, because now I know for sure that's not what I wanted. Like, if I went down my career path the way I did without going through that, I feel like I would always have doubts of maybe like I would still like college or something. But now I know I don't. So now I like whatever I'm doing even more because I don't have that doubt in the back of my brain.
I did listen to my parents. There were times where I disagreed, and that's where, I'm telling you, I came to them with information. And so rather than fighting them, I tried convincing them, and so that they could be comfortable with it.
Okay.
Because if I fight them, they're just going to continue to be, uncomfortable about the situation.
That seems to be the trend. A lot of times you have to just educate your parents, and then they eventually they start to understand.
I mean, the whole point of our parents coming here is so that we have freedom. They shouldn't be turning into the oppressors either.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was younger, I was really involved in musical theater. I loved the arts. I took piano vocal lessons for 10 plus years, classically trained, and I really wanted to pursue that professionally. But I didn't have the support of my parents at all, in any way or shape, unless it was for the church. They only wanted me to perform for the church. So when I did get accepted to college, one of the colleges that I got accepted into was AMDA, American Musical Dramatic Arts, which is based in New York. And I couldn't go there because my parents were like, you have to go to an accredited 4-year university and get a degree to become a doctor, lawyer, dentist, engineer, whatever. So I did do that. I went to Arizona State, got my degrees. Originally was going down the law school path, but then switched and decided to just get my master's and do what I'm doing now. It's not something that I necessarily regret because my feelings towards pursuing a field in musical theater did change. However, it was a constant tug with my parents and I because they never supported me in it. They wouldn't come to my shows. They didn't want me to do it. And it just felt like they would put me down a lot.
Was that a form of rebellion against your decision by not coming to your shows?
I don't know if it's a form of rebellion. I think it was just because they didn't find it interesting.
Okay.
It wasn't something that interested them,
So they weren't being vindictive, or it was more so of they just didn't get it?
Yeah, they didn't want to see me sing an opera song, They were like, why?
Yeah. I see.
But then I see my mom sitting on Facebook watching videos of kids, singing. And I'm like, so why didn't you come to any of my
That could have been me.
Yeah, that could have been
Right,
me. Yeah.
I think growing up I did, but now as I get older and more involved within the community, it's changed a little bit.
Yeah.
So I don't feel as much confliction or any issues, but definitely when I was younger, for sure.
It was a hard thing to get across to them.
Yeah.
Why do you
Because
think that is?
I think growing up in Chicago, the suburbs, going to school with not many Assyrians also attending the schools, it was my siblings and I, we were forced to kind of mesh with the culture of just what was around us. So there wasn't that many Assyrians, like at least in the schools that I attended. So it was hard to keep it.
No, I did what mom wanted to do because I wanted to make mom happy. I feel like dad really was like, go to school, college, educate. What did they tell you? They said lawyer, doctor, or Engineer. You did one of those. I did.
Well, I didn't do it.
I did finance.
I didn't
right?
do it because I listened to them. I did it because I was like, I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to be a lawyer. The only thing I'm good at is math. So become an engineer.
Okay, but let me ask you. So where I stand, it's like, what I feel like foreign parents don't understand is because they feel like it's not okay to be blue collar. They want to push you away from that blue collar.
Even though dad's blue collar.
And how many times have we tried to do blue collar stuff and he's like, don't even try.
Yeah, because they understand how hard it is.
I feel like it's okay to be blue collar in America because you make so.
Oh no, there's nothing wrong with it.
No, for sure.
But they just want better for their kids.
They push education for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. They push like a more like a book education rather than like physical like.
Well, when you're blue collar your whole life, you think that white collar is easier life that garners more money. That's what they think, but actually, it's switched today.
So much
blue
money
collar
now
makes a lot of money
because nobody knows how to do electricity.
Because everyone's white collar now.
Yeah,
that's why.
Like nobody knows how to do plumbing. You need an electrician to do anything. You need a mechanic to do anything.
So the immigrants were always right because they're always good with their hands, right?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I didn't have any problems, luckily. Again, my parents, both of them came to the States a little bit earlier. My mom, born 71, she came to America, she was like 20, but she would travel a lot. It's not like she was like, kind of stuck or isolated in the Middle East. And my father moved, he was in America at the age of 11, grew up in Chicago. So yes, they're both immigrant parents per definition, but they were both, kind of modern, more of the modern like parents and some of the things that they raised me and my brother with. And so they always emphasize like education. They emphasize like the importance of getting an education, working, and all those things. But it wasn't like they put pressure on us. I remember the only thing that my dad would do is like, he knew I was good in math, and so he would always like tell me, you should be an engineer. You should be an engineer. Ever since I was a little kid. So I kind of just grew up with that like mindset, and I saw that was a good opportunity. So I pursued engineering, but like my brother's in the medical field. My parents never like forced us or like made us feel guilty for not doing anything. They just emphasized education, and I think, again with the values and everything that they taught us and growing up, those were the things that we wanted to do naturally, like freely. So we never had any like problems over there. One thing that we did realize, and I don't know if it was implemented by our parents, but seeing other Assyrian families. Again, luckily and thankfully, my parents didn't really suffer in the Middle East. They didn't go through any like hardship. But knowing so many of my Assyrian friends and their families and the things that they went through, when you realize the freedoms that you have and the opportunities that you have here, you want to capitalize. You want to take advantage of those opportunities. And I've seen that with so many of my Assyrian friends and brothers and sisters that. Their families did go through trouble and they didn't have the opportunities that they had in the Middle East. But they came here and their children view that, they saw that, what their parents went through and the freedom that we have here in America, and they've capitalized and they've, done well for themselves, whether it's a business venture, whether it's education. They've taken advantage of the opportunities that they have here in America versus the lack of opportunities that their parents had growing up in the Middle East. So,
did you find it difficult to do that? Did you listen to your parents because of the sacrifices they made in their lives?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes,
Do
I
you
did
regret
exactly
it?
what they asked me to do. I don't regret it, but I wish I would have pursued what I wanted to do as well. Like what they advised me to do, I would take it to heart, but also try to incorporate what I wanted to do into that.
So when you see young people like myself who don't listen to their parents because they want to do the things they want to do you understand it in a way sometimes?
I do understand it, yes.
Yeah.
But I say follow your heart, follow your dream. That's the bottom line. Because parents, they know best in most cases, but sometimes you just gotta do what you have to do.
Do you think the Assyrians have a culture of resilience or trauma?
Both.
Yeah.
For sure, both.
Can't have one without the other, in my opinion.
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
For sure.
I think it's a little bit of both.
Definitely resilience. You can say both. We've obviously gone through traumatic experiences. We all know that.
I kind of see it as both.
Resilience with trauma.
Both.
Resilience. Resilient to the trauma that they've endured, resilient to all the sufferings that we've been through. But you see the resilience. We're at a picnic today. We had a walkathon for the church. The language, the history, everything. As long as we keep it alive, as long as we continue speaking and continue promoting and letting people know who we are and what we do, I think it shows and it reveals the resilience that we have. There's non-Assyrians at these other ramadas, and they're coming over asking who we are, what kind of dancing you're doing, what kind of food we're doing. So they're all they're learning the culture that we have.
I think I always had this idea that being Assyrian was like a traumatic experience because we've endured genocide, we've endured being exiled from our homelands, and I never thought about the resilience of the people that chose to stay. And after I got to do this trip, I understood there isn't a weakness behind leaving. You choose whether or not you want maybe a more secure life for your future, or do you want to support a nationalistic cause. And I think that just depends on what your priority is, but I don't think either or is wrong.
The persecution, the cultural persecution, the physical persecution, religious persecution, but that because we've gone through the trauma, it means we're very resilient. We stand around today, despite that persecution, we're still thriving in many ways, more than we think. We think the Assyrian situation, the Assyrian condition, is worse than it actually is. We tend to look at the negatives versus the positives. So I'll just say people should be more encouraged than discouraged.
Because they were traumatized, but they didn't let that set them back. They decided to use that trauma to fight back when they came to America and establish themselves here. So that is something that I really respect with my parents. Like, for example, my mother, she had the hardest life growing up in Iraq. Like, her father passed away at a very early age. She was raised by her grandparents because her mother was always working and never home. So when she came to America, she built herself up, was able to open her own business in Chicago. And then, when she married my father, at a very early age, my father got sick. And she had to give up her business to move us here to Arizona to help take care of him. And I really think that she did everything that she could to give us the life that we have now. So there were things that she couldn't take advantage of, but we were lucky enough to take advantage of them.
They're fleeing their country, so that's going to give you trauma.
For sure.
And then now they come here, they're making a name out of nothing. They're very resilient at what they want to do. They don't take no for an answer. If they have something in mind, they're going to get it done.
Yeah,
and
they don't take no for an answer.
No, they can't. We have a joke. They can't have, Assyrians cannot have bosses. They cannot have somebody above them. They will kill them.
They're sick in the head.
They are sick in the head.
You tell me what to do?
Resilience because we're still here, right? Trauma because of the last 100 years, right? You look at my wife's family. So you go pre-World War I, everybody lived one place. And then so my wife's great-grandparents were born in South Turkey pre-World War I. After World War I, all Christians were getting massacred because we were idiots and decided to help with the Brits, and that didn't end well. So everybody left, right? That's how you have Assyrians in Russia and in different parts of the world. So her great-grandparents left. Her grandparents were born in Russia. Then Russia went communist. They started killing all non-Russians and Christians. Then in Iran, so in like 4 or 5 generations, you went from Hakkari, southern Turkey, Russia, Iran, and now here, right? So there's a trauma. Resilience in that we're still here. My daughter's read and write the language. We still speak the language. Not as good as we should, obviously.
Of course. We're doing this interview in English.
Right.
Yeah.
That's my first language, but I could speak Assyrian as well as an old lady. Like, don't get it twisted.
Yeah.
Right? Don't get it twisted.
I'm talking about me.
Yeah, no. I'm that last breed because I bridged the gap, right? I bridged the old. You guys, you have nothing, but I can hang out with fobs from Iraq. To you guys, right? So both, to answer your question. Sorry, a little bit of tangent.
If you've made it through, you've gained some level of resilience, Now, it doesn't mean that you don't collect some scars along the way and some kinks in the battle armor, right? But I think that if you can make it through that trauma, if you can make it through the difficult times, whether it's semele or like different atrocities that were going on, then you've already developed a layer of armor and a thicker skin.
I think there's generational trauma that comes with being Assyrian because, you know, our parents and the land that they came from, there were wars, there was so much conflict there. So I feel like they brought that with them, but also resilience at the same time, because it's like you look back and you see how prideful Assyrians are and how we love our culture so much that it's been kept on so many years, you know? So a little bit of both.
How did you react when you first came to America and nobody knew what Assyrians were? How did that make you feel? And when did you start realizing that we're not that well known in the world?
Growing up, it was kind of frustrating because you'd read in the history books and social studies that you don't exist anymore. And then you get tired of having to explain to people over and over again. But you know, what I did find was that Europeans, Japanese, Russians, you tell them you're Assyrian, they know exactly who you are.
I got used to it. A lot of my friends didn't know. I was the only Assyrian in my high school until, you know, me and my brother were the only Assyrians. So, it was cool. Like, people would ask, like, what are you, or what language do you speak? And you give them a background of it, and you tell them who you are. And if, you know, your friends would sort of like, they would want to learn words, Assyrian words. Anytime, you know, we had a big family get together, some of my friends would come over, and they saw like the family culture that we had, the values. They would eat Assyrian meals. So we would just take opportunities to like let people know who the Assyrian people are. Some of my non-Assyrian friends would meet my Assyrian friends from like the church and stuff. So we get, you know, acclimated that way, and they would at the end of it, a lot of them would feel proud that, oh, you know, we have an Assyrian friend.
When I was like 16 in high school, when I was going through high school, nobody would know who the Assyrians were, right? Like, they'd be like, I have to explain it to them. Like, I would just have to, like, you know, do that thing that you have to do every time you meet someone. No, I'm not Assyrian, I'm Assyrian. Like, you have to do one of those, right? Every single time. I feel like now, like, with the prominent figures, like, coming up in the community, I feel like now every time I say, like, oh, I'm Assyrian, maybe like 1 out of every 3 people are like, oh, like this person. I'm like, exactly.
Yeah, that's like
I'm like, exactly.
That's good. That's a big bump up.
I feel like now people are understanding the name more. But back in high school, bro, I was fighting for my life, explaining everything.